Welcome to the Better Start podcast, where we have conversations about AI, software dev, and all kinds of new tech. I'm one of your hosts, Richard, and I'm joined by
James. Hello.
Andres. Hello.
And I'm Vincent. Hello.
As you mentioned offline, Vincent, you have a lot of keyboards. Do you want to tell us how you got into that? What's the hobby?
Right. Okay. So usually when people watch the YouTube thing, they kind of go like, gee, that guy has an unhinged amount of keyboards. It did all start with a pretty sad story though. So I got some relatively serious RSI issues in this hand. I don't have them anymore. But there was this point in time when you have your normal keyboard, and whenever you hit enter, you have to do this wrist movement to the right. Oh, and that was just painful. It was a really bad habit. You can also have a better habit, either by exercising or by actually lifting your hand before you actually hit that key. But anyway, I had some serious RSI issues, and I kind of went okay, I have to invest in maybe a more ergonomic setup, and then maybe doing the keyboards thing would be good. But then I just noticed that so many of these reviews on YouTube are just bad. And part of me gets it because, if you do a positive review, the same provider of keyboards is going to come back and give you another sample because you keep saying nice things. But if you're watching a review, you also want to hear about the negative things. So I kind of went I guess it's up to me. Whenever I review these things, I will definitely talk about the pluses, but I also want to have some guy on the internet also talking about the negatives. And that eventually led me to, my first 4 videos where eventually I landed on this one keyboard that I like. It's the Glove 80. It's a very sensible default if you have wrist issues. But then people started noticing, and they started sending me stuff. So most of the keyboards that you see behind me, not all of them, are not paid with my own money. So that's how this thing just got started. Eventually you just turn into this YouTuber guy that receives random stuff from strangers on the internet, some of which I'm happy to review. But that's the short story. And eventually, it becomes a bit more of a hobby. So you start exploring all these super fancy switches and etc. But
are you still doing that occasionally? Reviewing keyboards on the channel?
Yep. It's on my personal one. At some point you will have had the big fancy showstopper keyboards. Eventually you've had them, so then you go more niche and niche and niche. But it's the thing for me is, as long as it's a fun hobby, I'll just keep doing it. And if it's no longer fun, then maybe I'll stop. But until then, I do have a nice backdrop for YouTube stuff that I do in general. So that helps the hobby, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I'm not that deep into keyboards. Oh, sorry, you go, James.
I was going to say, I tried to get into the hobby as well, but it's an expensive one to start to get into. I think you can get in quite good on cheap ones these days, but that's sort of where I ended, and I was like, it's going to cost me a lot of money if I dive deeper into this hobby.
That's definitely true, and I hate making a recommendation for a keyboard that you should buy because it's a lot of money. I'd love to warn you about maybe what not to do, but I hate to tell you what you should do because you should figure it out yourself. The one thing I will say, though, on this whole topic, at some point is not necessarily so much about having a quote-unquote ergonomic keyboard, like a keyboard with a fancy symmetric shape. At some point, it's also about, I just want to have a keyboard that has firmware that I can flash so I can customize it. So I could maybe say that this caps lock, which is a useless button, that becomes backspace, let's say. So that's just a less distance for your hand. Or that you, trigger Whisper or whatever app you like, and that you just really customize the keyboard itself, such that when you switch laptops or different devices, that you carry along good habits with you. And to anyone who's interested in doing things with Vim, the one thing I'll say is you can configure Vim. Imagine being able to also configure the keyboard along with it. There's something very productive about that. Let alone it's also more ergonomic, but it's also something very fun about being able to customize your hardware as well.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on that part. But yeah, it's difficult to find the keyboards that you can customize, because you can get lots of keyboards out there, but they don't have firmware that you can do that with. But there are software alternatives. So I know there's Carabiner Elements, which is quite popular for the Mac, and also Kanata. What's your view on those?
I mean, it's if you only have Mac, I guess you could do it. But I also use Linux, so I need something that lets me do both. And then I gotta say, even the Keychron and Newfie keyboards, those come with QMK, which is this firmware under the hood. Both Newfie and Keychron are building their own sort of semi-proprietary thing on top of it. So it's not as open as it could be, but it's still pretty decent. And switching keys around, you can definitely configure all of that. So that's all great. The only downside with their software, typically, I don't know to what extent they're changing that now, but typically there's this thing known as a home row modification. So you got to imagine you can tap a key, but you can also keep it pressed down, which is typically what you would do with Shift for capital letters. But why only Shift? You could also say, for J, if I tap it, it's just J, but if I keep it pressed down, then it's Shift. And that way you have access to maybe not just Shift, but Command and Control and Alt without having to move your hand at all. And you can do that for both hands. And, again, sky's the limit. You can do all sorts of fancy things. But the timing of which you keep the key pressed down, that is something you typically cannot configure with the keycron or NuFi stuff. Then you actually have to go down, either use different open source software, there's Vile, but then you have to sort of drill down. But yeah, long story short, this is a hobby of mine. We can talk about this for ages, but that's why I have lots of these keyboards. It's just this hobby that kind of got out of hand because of YouTube, because the moment you start making videos, vendors just come at you. That's a short story.
I was going to say, do those vendors just send them to you with no expectations, or do some of them try and add things like, please don't review this badly? Or,
I mean,
then you just ignore them?
No, well, so the thing that the one thing that did happen this one time is, I found this thing that was really awkward in this keyboard once. And let's not name a brand here, but one thing that did happen is I mentioned it to them, and it's like I like all of these things. These two things are just a little bit awkward, so I'm going to mention those. And then you do get this thing of like, okay, well, we have affiliate links, just so you know, right? You can put your affiliate links in your little description thing at the bottom. But I just have a rule that I never do affiliate links. And having that rule also makes the hobby more of a hobby, because then the people that come to you are just also genuinely interested in like having the review out there. What I've also had happen to me is there's a couple of these companies that want my feedback while they are designing the keyboard itself. And that's, that does fall a little bit in the murky waters, because obviously if they're then going to ask a review from me, it's more likely to be positive, so to say. I have accepted those in the past, but only when vendors are trying to do something new and interesting, because then it's just my own curiosity just takes over at that point.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. Let's actually move into less keyboard. We could jump into keyboard stuff a bit later on, but I was going to say that there are a lot of us, most of us here, myself included, like JavaScript, TypeScript people. I don't know about Andres, I think you are.
I am.
Okay, fine. and so I know Vincent is a huge Python guy. We do have a Python person on the team. He's unfortunately unable to make the podcast. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I think it'll be more like explainery stuff to us more than kind of talking to Python people. But yeah, let's start off by saying what you do and who you are.
Sure. So hi, my name's Vincent. I also do a bit of JavaScript, just to be clear on that front.
Okay.
But I'm definitely more well known in the sort of the Python ecosystem. So I'm like, there's different types of ecosystems in Python. You've got like the web people. You might have heard of frameworks like Django or Flask or Fast API. That's what a lot of people do. But then I think if you go like, what's the use case of Python these days? A lot of that is just data stuff. So machine learning things, data frame libraries. And that's also sort of my background. There's a conference called PyData that I helped organize in Amsterdam. So that's like a little bit of background about me. I've also made a couple of like scikit-learn plugins. That's what a lot of people know me from. I've also worked for a lot of open source companies doing data stuff in the space. So people might have heard of Spacey and Explosion and Rasa and like scikit-learn. Like that's my background. Nowadays, I work for a company called Marimo. We were acquired like half a year ago. And one way to explain what we do is we have a new Python notebook that is increasingly popular. You could look at it as like the next evolution of Jupyter. That's like a way people like to describe it. Yeah, we grow about 5% a week when you look at the download numbers. Like that's our average right now. So like I've seen a project grow like 11x over a year, which is like super fun experience. But that's what I do, and that's what I'm most active with. I do a little bit of engineering there, but I'm also on the growth team. So like that's sort of the main activity that I do. So I try to figure out cool, new, fun ways to use this new notebook. And yeah, while also like being part of a small team. I think we're 9 people now-ish. Like we're still relatively small. But that's sort of what I've been doing and what I'm focused on right now.
Nice. And I think, I don't know if I'm wrong, but I read somewhere that you're self-taught in data. Is that correct? I
mean, I have a background in econometrics and operations research. So I definitely had like an applied math background, and that definitely helps. But I mean, the courses in programming that they gave me were like for programming languages like Oxmetrics, which is like, if you're a super econometrics nerd, that'll be useful maybe, but like nothing like that in the real world. So eventually, the main switch for me mentally was I saw this thing come out called D3. Like I just started graduating when D3 came out for the first time. And I saw that and I was kind of like, oh man, that's just amazing. Like it's really cool to do the math on paper, but if you can translate that to these interactive things in the computer, like, oh, I got to learn how to do this. So I taught myself just enough of that to also be able to build tools for Python people and R people that, a lot of Python people don't learn JavaScript, but I started out with D3. So I ended up building like all these fancy little interactive tools that could work in the web together with Python that other people would never really build. And that actually got me a little bit of a foot in the door in the Python ecosystem. And then I just taught myself a whole lot of Python from there. That's like part of the story. Another part of the story was also that when I graduated, I contemplated that, I don't know, maybe this programming thing isn't for me because I was kind of an extrovert and not a lot of programmers were extroverted. So don't know for sure, but like I was wondering. So I did this big trip through Latin America while backpacking, and I also had like some work with me as an independent contractor from the Netherlands doing a little bit of Python work. And while backpacking, I had a couple of these evenings where I kind of felt like, sure, I could go clubbing, but I want to do an evening of recreational programming, actually. That just sounds more fun. And that was like a really big sign for me, like, okay, like something with this programming does feel like that's a hit. So when I came back to the Netherlands, to a place where I live, I did know, like, okay, Vincent, you got to double down on this, because if you don't want to, if you don't feel like clubbing in an exotic place and instead you want to do programming, you have to double down on programming and like teach yourself all the things. And that's like a version of the Marvel superhero background origin story, I guess.
Nice. I don't know if I'm jumping into someone else's questions, but for your kind of arc into, I don't know, superhero arc, what was the reason for kind of doing? Because I know you've got something called Calm Code, which is like a place where you do teach courses and stuff. What was the reason for that?
Right. So one thing I noticed is like eventually so I could teach you how an oven works, right? But it doesn't teach you how to cook. And it just started feeling to me that like a lot of these courses were more like manuals and a little bit less of like, yeah, okay, but if you really want to cook the pizza, just like make sure you throw the dough in the air this way, which has nothing to do with how the machine works, but like it is a step that you got to learn if you want to make like great pizza. And there were like a few of these moments where, looking at both educational material on the internet as well as like stuff I did for my former employer, I just kind of fed up with the way that things were taught. Like sometimes you can just explain something in 2 minutes and then move on to like cooler stuff. So that led me to just experiment with this thing called Calm Code, where every weekend I would just look at a few tools that I thought could be explained better, and I would just make a course, which is typically like 5 videos of 2 to 3 minutes each. And then after half an hour, you will have just gotten a good impression of what like a topic in Python could be all about. So context managers, generators, like a few of these topics. You don't need an hour to explain that. You just need like 5 good 3-minute videos, and then you can start playing with it. And that's just something I've maintained. I started working on that like 5-6 years ago or something. Nowadays, it's a lot less popular because of all these freaking LLMs. But I still get like, I don't know, I think like 1 million people saw the website in total, some of which, took a bunch of courses. Some of them eventually became paying members. Like 99% of the courses are free. Just a few of them you got to pay for to help me pay with the server fees. But I don't know, I still get like a few hundred, maybe 1,000 people a month that watch the website, and I still keep it up. And people, the funniest thing is more that like I sometimes go to meetups in Amsterdam, and there'll be like a Brazilian guy that randomly walks up to me and goes like, "You're the Calm Code guy." I'm like, sure, like, hello person from the other side of the planet. Yeah, that's a hobby project of mine that I started 5 years ago. So I still get like a lot of like cool high five moments because of it, but it's not something I do super actively anymore. But yeah, I always make fun side projects. Like this was like one fun side project I did, and in hindsight, even though it didn't make me a millionaire, which is also just totally fine, it did give me reputation, which I definitely still benefit from. Like 5 years later, easy.
I did want to actually ask,
go on.
How did you end up in Netherlands?
I mean, I'm Dutch, so that helps.
You are, okay. Couldn't tell by your accent.
Kunnen het gesprek ook in Nederlands hebben als je wil. It's just that I've got a good accent. So
it's very good accent. Okay.
Yeah, so no, I was born in the United States, but my parents are just Dutch. So like I did high school here and like college and everything. But I did go back for brugklasjaar. What's that in English? Like junior high school is when I went to the US. I did 1 year in Boston, 1 year in California. But this was like before social media, kind of, when I was there. So I actually became pen pals with a lot of people, and I kept like writing letters for like years to like my friends in the US. So that just, I always kept interacting to like people that I consider to be close in English, which also means you never lose the accent, really.
But I think Dutch people in general have really good English. Like whenever I go to Amsterdam, everyone speaks fluent English.
So the big trick on that one is, at least in my generation, we always put like Dutch subtitles in like English movies, which is not what the French and German did. They would just overdub it, which if you do that for like a generation, suddenly the entire Dutch population speaks English pretty well, and all of our neighbors don't. So like, no surprise, lots of US companies set up shop in Amsterdam as opposed to like Berlin, as like one of the reasons. I'm sure there's many more. But yeah, no, like I was partially raised in the US, and hence the accent. So a lot of people look at me it took a while for my neighbors to realize that I was actually Dutch too. Like it's a it's a funny weird thing. But yeah, I'm more Dutch than American at this point.
Cool. So going back to something you said earlier, just like under your breath, just like all these freaking LLMs, I would have thought, as someone who's big into Python and data science, that you'd be a massive fan of LLMs and where AI is going. So what's your viewpoint? Are you pro or against?
Okay, so there's a lot of people that are blue-pilled, and there's a lot of people that are red-pilled. I am purple-pilled, I think. So I definitely see a lot of reasons to be optimistic, but I also see lots of reasons to be sort of in the red. There's a few things I think are really cool about it, and there's a few things that I really don't. So if I go to YouTube and let's say, oh, I might want to learn about Hermes. Like people tell me Hermes, something Hermes. So like, I want to learn that. You type in Hermes and you look for a video that's like a good, calm explainer of like what Hermes might be. And the first 10 videos, could you imagine what the thumbnail is going to look like? Can you imagine what the intro is going to be like for those videos? Are they going to be like really nice, boring videos that explain to me how a thing works? Or is it going to be like super hype-ridden, some bro with a weird accent, putting his face in the camera more than what's on his screen? And is that the new norm now? That's one thing I don't like about LLMs. There's this hype around it that's a lot less about explaining how it's actually working or here's what I learned, and a lot more of like, oh, I'm a dude on the internet who wants to sell courses. Something about LLMs has just made that thing grow a lot bigger. And that's the thing I really don't like. Because I like it when things are boring and we can try to understand it and we can just sort of exchange notes. Like that's I think the way you learn something. It's not that we just need to have peers. I don't want to have like gurus, if it makes sense. I just want to be in this phase of like we're trying to figure this out together. Another thing I also don't necessarily like about it is like a thing you could do with an LLM is you could say like, okay, here's a bit of text, and I want to know if this text is about like positive sentiment or not. Like, is this a compliment or not? Like, let's say we have some sort of a classifier for that. And you could use an LLM for it. But this is also like a classic ML moment also just still works, right? And we do have this weird moment where people just go, oh, let's a problem and just put the LLM sticker on it and go that way instead of taking a step back and sort of think like, what's the simplest we could do? And surely it's not like boiling the ocean with an LLM just to get a positive, negative sentiment out, for God's sakes. So there is also something about it that makes people not want to take a step back and do the simplest thing anymore. They immediately want to double down and dive into the LLM, and like you still want to think for yourself as well. Like my favorite hobby is when I have a new problem is I go away from the computer. I have a pen and paper. I go to a park or a bar and I just sit there like a caveman thinking about the problem with my own mind. And it also feels like less people are doing that. Okay, so these are all the negatives. But then there is, of course, the utility that I also don't want to deny. Like one thing that is just plain awesome is the fact of like, oh, I want to make a video game. I've never done Lua before. Can I just use this Love 2D framework just to bootstrap something? And suddenly, like the entry point for me to maybe learn with a lot less headaches is just there. That's really cool. It does require discipline, though, if you want to learn that way, because it's really tempting to sort of put a coin in the slot machine, like make me video game, make no mistakes, and like see what happens, right? So like there's a temptation there that I'm also not a fan of. But if you do it right, and if you also try to like do some things manually now and again and still like eat your vegetables, oh, then you can do a whole lot of stuff you couldn't do before. So and maybe just to give like a example, like so Marimo, it's like a Python notebook, which is very similar to a observable notebook, which I think is closer to home to the JavaScript crowd. But one thing I can really do is I can say like, oh, I wish I had like this weird widget that lets me do a thing, and then I can interact with Python in a different way. Very simple example. There's a couple of like 8-bit do controllers over there. Browsers come with a gamepad API. And a really cool thing is like I could hit a button and then like a specific thing happens in Python. Oh, if only there's a simple way to bind the API in the browser with a widget into Python. And there's a spec called AnyWidget. But I don't have to dive into the docs of browsers to just get a prototype working and to see if it's actually a nice way to interact with Python. And it turns out that for some things in Python that you might want to do, if you're doing things with LLMs, you might want to annotate some data to see if the LLM got it right. So like the input text, and there's a label that the LLM said, and then you can sort of go yes, no, correct, yes, no. And you can now do that in the Marimo notebook with a very ergonomically designed device, a game controller. And yeah, building that is like super easy because of these LLMs. And you still want to check the code, Matt, like yourself a little bit, right? But just to get like the first step going, if you're not a JavaScript hero by any stretch of the meaning, you can still get far pretty easily, and you can also still learn while doing it. So that's a good thing. But yeah, no, the hype around it is not productive at all. That's the thing I dislike very much about it. But it's also not new. Like we've had that with the data science and machine learning thing as well. Like it's a thing of always. It's just that it feels worse this time around as far as the hype is concerned. I don't really know where to put my finger on it. Again, there's tons of good reasons to be very optimistic. The way that we've gotten LLMs to work in Marimo is also like super cool. You can do lots of experiments with maps and stuff super quickly. But finding reliable people to listen to, like in podcasts and stuff, turns out to be a challenge just because there's so many people selling courses. And I mean, you have the same thing too, right? Like you can make a video about like a non-LLM topic or an LLM topic, and you're probably noticing that like making a really good standalone video about a non-LLM topic is harder now just because there's so much demand for those videos.
I also seem to find the comments of AI videos tend to be a little more negative and like hating AI, but then the video itself will just get more views, and it's just like, so some people clearly are interested, they're just not saying it. And I think, yeah, again, people are sort of just chasing whatever the new thing is in AI all of the time, and it does get into a bit of a cycle that's hard to break from.
I'm gonna give you the weirdest anecdote that's related to this. If I say like 1800s, the Dynamite balloon story, would you know what I'm talking about?
No.
Okay. It's a weird tangent, but we're going to bring it back. So in the end of the 1800s, like after the Second World War, like Napoleon era-ish, we definitely had science, right? Like we knew that empiricism would kind of work, but we weren't really good at predicting the weather. But boy, was there demand for it. Oh man, like if you could predict the weather, like, oh, that could, like, we could know when a drought was coming, which food security wasn't 100% yet, right? So like, oh man, if we could predict the weather, demand for that is super high. Supply of that is zero because no one really knew how to predict the weather. But something weird happens when demand for thing is super high. Some sort of quackery supply is going to show up. Like that's just the thing that's going to happen. But why predict the weather when you can make people believe that you could cause it? That would be even better. And there was this wide belief that like after a battle, it would typically rain. Like there's notes that Napoleon believed this, and a lot of generals that, you know, went through civil war also believed this. So then there came this guy, his name starts with a G, Grinsworth or something, and he actually convinced the US Congress to fund him like $1 million worth of dynamite and balloons and kites to make it go boom in the sky in order to make it rain, right? This actually happened. Like in today's money, like millions of dollars was spent making it go boom in the sky because people wanted it to rain. Now, obviously, after a while, it turned out to be quackery, and people started noticing, like, okay, we should probably not do this. And then also, eventually, we got better communication, so people could actually share data on weather patterns, and that's where, you know, modern weather predicting came from. But every time that I see just how much demand there is, like, how should we think about this AI thing? It just feels so similar. So we have a very big demand for knowledge that no one can really provide. So there's just this risk of like quackery if you're not careful. And the best way to sort of guard yourself against this is to look for boring people instead. So people just do really boring research that are mainly just trying to share some data and some insights and aren't necessarily trying to sell you courses or anything like that. That's sort of, that feels like if we're going to learn anything from dynamites in the sky, this might be the best thing to do right now.
It kind of reminds me how everyone says that we will solve climate change. But for that, we need a lot of AI, a lot of data centers. So nobody talks about what that is going to do to the climate, but we will solve it at the end.
And that's also the South Park underpants gnomes at some point. So it's like step one, thing. Step two, I don't know. But step three, profit. For some weird reason, we're going to figure out how to like steal underpants and then become millionaires. I don't know.
The other thing that sort of reminds me of that makes me distrust people is sometimes you'll see someone hyping AI massively, like on Twitter. Then you go on that Twitter, scroll back a bit, and it will either end up at crypto or NFTs. And I'm like, you've just jumped onto the next thing that's getting engagement. And it does not feel genuine.
But there are I'm going to quote like boring in a good way people out there that do make interesting notes. So Simon Willison, I think, is a really good example. And he's fairly well known, but he's just trying to be a journalist about it. And he will actively apologize when he makes a mistake, which, you know, is what you should be doing. There's also this other podcast that I've been diving into that I do recommend. Corey something. Like he was a video game programmer. We'll add it to the show notes. But he had like his attitude is also, I'm a very senior C++ programmer. I know nothing about AI, and he also doesn't want to learn AI. But a buddy of his actually is a professor and all that. So then he has like regular interviews about like a theme, and it's just boring stuff, but good, which is also, I think, maybe a bit of advice. But anyway. I'm sure that, like, this is also like such a universal thing that everyone is also just noticing. For me at least, and also with the Marimo channel, it feels obligatory to also make content about how we can integrate with AI stuff. So, we do that. But we also try to just celebrate the things you can do without AI, which is also really cool. So like all the interactive stuff and, fun data set, let's dive into that. So one thing I did a while ago was like download all the boxes of Legos, like the prices of the box. And I'm telling myself, like, I'm a dad now, so I have to figure out how to invest in Legos. And like, okay, but then actually do that research and like actually make the dashboard of all the boxes of Legos and try to figure out which boxes of Legos are the best price per brick and like silly things like that as well.
I don't know what hobby's more expensive, Lego or keyboards. Lego's getting up there these days.
So fun fact. So there's this rumor online that if you were to buy a Marvel box of Legos, presumably Lego has to pay for the IP. So then less money is available per dollar or per euro for the bricks itself. Turns out that's not so. There's not statistically significant evidence for that, but like things like that you can research on your own.
So earlier you mentioned like what Marimo does, this newer kind of Jupyter notebooks, and you said the equivalent in the JavaScript world, there isn't really one, but it's Observables, which is a website that
Observables pretty close, I would say.
It's pretty close. It does a similar thing, but that kind of style of reading and writing code and doing research hasn't really taken off in JavaScript as much as it has in Python. Do you want to speak to that? Do you think you'd know why?
I mean, so most of what JavaScript people are doing, presumably, is make a website. Not 100%, because there's other stuff you can do too, right? But let's say, presumably, most of it's building a website or some sort of online experience to the least, but even then, most of it is building a website. Now, if you're building a website, you probably know what you want. Like, we need a login thing there and like a button here. And like, we need a flow for a user and it has to look good, be good interactive. Like, but that's like the mindset, I think. Then if I think about like the use case on Python side, it's not so much Python here. It's more about like, I've got this unknown data set. I've got no idea what's in it. And I would like to predict something like, I don't know, churn or the demand on the grid or like whatever thing you've got the data set for. And that means that you need to have some sort of a coding environment that's really good at the interactive exploration thing. And for that, you need some sort of a, like iterative front-end thing where you can just easily make quick changes and see like a different chart, but also need libraries that can actually deal with all that data. And JavaScript has always been like a very flexible language, but the data part has always been, there's some things you could do, but once you've got like gigabytes of data and we have to do machine learning, like there's kind of like a gap there. Python fills in that gap very well, but you still want to have some sort of an interactive environment to like experiment and do things where you have no idea what you're going to do with this data set yet because you haven't looked at it yet. Okay, that's where the notebook really comes in strong. So the IDEs are amazing, but like where can I make a chart show up? It's like a non-existent thing. And honestly, it's really been all about like I've got this data set over here, some sort of an object, a data frame that can allow me to make quick group by kinds of edits, and then the ability to just make any chart that I like. That's what a notebook started as, just a place where I can actually interactively make all these charts. And again, like that's also, I think, even with LLMs and like people like to predict the future. At least for the time being, I don't see any future in which Python isn't there to help you do the data thing. It's very hard for me to imagine, but that's where the hole that Python filled.
Piggybacking on Richard's question a bit, I've always wondered, like, for all the low-level languages, why did Python become like the go-to language for machine learning? Because why not C++ or Rust or any other of those?
It's related to the same thing. Like, okay, you want to make a chart. Are you going to compile your code and then wait until a chart comes out? Or do you want it interactive? So like whatever language you're going to have that's going to let you do the interactive thing, it needs to be a dynamic language REPL, right? Okay, so that excludes all the compiled stuff. Now you can do this trick, which happens a lot in Python. So Python has great bindings to C. So all the heavy numeric libraries, there's one data frame library called Polars. It's all written in Rust. And then Python is more like the UI than really the thing that's running on runtime. And then there's NumPy, which is all about matrices and things. And that's all written in BLAS and C and like very low level languages. It's just that there's this Python binding. But the whole point of the Python story there is it's very easy to just write down what you want the data to change into and then play around with it, really. Oh, and maybe I want this chart instead of that one. This has to be all super interactive. And imagine there being a compiler in the middle of that. It's just not going to be a great experience. So I think this is why we've landed here. So Python has great ability to make bindings from low-level languages if you really wanted to, but the developer experience is still very much like super interactive.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the first languages I actually picked up was Python, just for little scripts, because it felt so easy to do. It's sort of like anything on my Mac, and as you said, anything with data. You could just write a script and it would do it, and Python didn't seem as strict as the other languages, and it was quite easy once I already knew one language to jump into Python.
Yeah, like I think a fair assessment of Python is that in the end, it is a language that fits in your head very easily. So like if you spend if you spend a weekend there, there's like a lot of stuff that you could learn that still fits in your head the weekend after. And with Rust, I mean, I appreciate that it's all there, but it's oh my, there's a lot of grammar that you got to like really understand before you can write a sentence in Rust, if it makes sense. And there's good reasons for it, but Python is very much there's a couple of frameworks, and every framework does work in a slightly different way, but the language itself is actually pretty minimal and like super flexible at the same time.
Yeah. Also, going back to your point on notebooks, I think that was a thing I did years ago where I was messing around with some NLP language, but I did it at a previous job, and we just used notebooks for the whole thing. And so you could pass it a audio file, and it would run the process in the background, and it would kind of give you the text from the file or something like that.
Yeah, you probably like some sort of input thing in one cell, and then that would go to the next cell. It would turn that into a waveform, and that would turn it into text. And like you had like a shift enter enter enter. You'd go through the entire notebook, and then you would have your result at the end. That's what a lot of
the whole thing. So you can pretty much do anything you want with notebooks. You can like download libraries and all that stuff. Like what is the craziest thing that you've seen people do in a notebook?
I can tell you, I mean, a thing I like to do, I'm a bit non-standard, but a thing I really like to do is also really think about what the browser can do for you these days. Because it has like GPU rendering tricks, for example, that aren't in Python. So like, I could do maybe some fancy things where like I define something with a system of equations on the Python side because we've got great math libraries, but then have the actual rendering happening on the GPU on the browser side. So that's the thing you could do. The craziest thing I've ever done though, okay, so if I say differential equation, are you going to say like, bless you, or like, do we know what differential equations are? Just want to double check.
I'm going to first admit I have no idea.
Okay, so sometimes, and this is a physics thing, but sometimes it's quite hard to describe exactly what something will be, but it's very easy to describe how something might change. It's just a thing in physics. Sometimes the latter is easier to describe mathematically than the former. And that's called the differential equation. Like if sometimes we know something about the velocity of a thing or the acceleration of a thing, but we would really like to know, we would still like to predict the thing like 6 steps ahead. And okay, like how can we maybe deal with that? That's the differential equation. I never really grokked differential equations because I never really needed them. But I did like this one course in college. But then I learned about this one differential equation that's related to video games called Lanchester's law. So imagine Age of Empires, 2 armies, they bump into each other and like they duke it out totally. And you've got red army, you've got blue army, like all swords dudes basically, like smash it together. Can we predict which army will win and by how much? Like how many survivors are there of the largest army? Okay, now there's an equation here called Lanchester's law, which is a differential equation, which basically says the amount of army people you lose on your army depends on the size of the other army. Because that's the number of swords pointing at you, basically. So that's like a differential equation you could write down, and then you could try to solve that, and this is called the Lanchester's equation. And I've always felt like, okay, that's really cute, but I just look at the symbols and the math and it doesn't really hit me. Oh, but one thing I can do in JavaScript is I can actually build myself a battle simulator with like collision detection and all of those things, and then that can be a widget inside of my Python notebook, and it's just going to run all the simulations, and it's going to like log all of that into a data file. And then in hindsight in Python, I can actually see if Lanchester's law actually holds. Okay, and it does. So this is the longest story about how Vincent finally understood differential equations. It's by simulating Lanchester's law in one of these Python widgets. And again, a lot of the stuff is happening on the front end because there's like pretty good like visual ways to sort of do collision, like to show that collision detection is actually happening, which makes it a really fun interactive experience. But then to do the actual math and the actual charts, then we take a step back into Python again. But this is, I think, the most elaborately weird thing that's non-conventional that I've ever done in the notebook. Like, not a lot of people build battle simulators to understand differential equations on the day-to-day.
I mean, that would be a good way to teach differential equations in general in school, you know, I think.
I mean, the next step, obviously, is to actually do this with Age of Empires. I think that would be cool, too. But or StarCraft or whatever the fancy game is that kids play these days. But But the one thing I do like most about this notebook is it can be a very personalized experience of I want to understand thing, and especially because there's like good LLM bindings now. Like we've got this trick where you know how LLMs are like really good at writing into files, but then the moment you actually have to, it has to debug something, it has to awkwardly run the file, look at the terminal output in order to like really understand. There's like a lot of looping that happens when that happens. We have a trick where we kind of have a fake file, a scratch pad, that the LLM can actually access, and the LLM can write into it as they would normally with a file. It's just that that file has a Python context manager that gives you access to all the variables in the notebook. So that also means that Claude can just randomly inspect a variable instead of having to print everything and just really go into what's in memory right now. And again, like with things like that, with an LLM in a notebook, you can get super duper creative and like go in all sorts of elaborate directions. But and like it does feel like the sky's the limit. The only thing that I do notice, like when I'm using an LLM inside of a notebook, I really try to generate like 1 or 2 cells at a time. Like I never have it generate the entire notebook because again, I do like to be in the loop. I like to understand what's happening and also to sort of course correct it, steer it. And sometimes I also want to like implement a function myself because then I can check if I actually really understand. But yeah, there's something about, I actually see what's happening in the notebook. I can make it a really interactive experience. And something about that also makes it just a joy to debug. Because I often, whenever I'm dealing with like a numeric system, like a recommender engine or something, I've built a few of them like back in the day. You just need charts. There's no way around it. And REPLs are just not going to give you that. You need some sort of a notebook.
Yeah, I can't say I can resonate with what you're saying because I've never tried to build a recommendation engine, but I can understand kind of like the visual impact having a chart would make to something like this.
I mean, it's also like, how would you debug a recommender system, but you're not allowed to use charts? Like it just becomes kind of harder because, there was a bug over the weekend. Can we pinpoint when the bug actually happened? I mean, I would love to see a chart somewhere along the line there. And maybe you can put some of that in a dashboard. But again, it's one of those moments where if you don't know ahead of time what chart you're going to need, you need some sort of environment that's just really flexible. So that's where the notebook in Python really shines.
So how did you get from debugging recommendation engines to the growth team on Marimo and having like this mic and camera setup?
Right. I mean, a few weird things happened. So, I worked at this consultancy in Amsterdam, and I did start like a pretty popular conference. It's called PyData Amsterdam. It still exists 10 years later, so we did something right there. I wasn't the only one, by the way. Like we had a group of people, but still. I got quite comfortable on stage as well. Like another thing I did in college, I was a bartender at like a comedy bar in the Netherlands, like the one of the more well-known ones. And then in the summer when the theater would close, I would do like tour guides in Amsterdam. So I would just steal all the jokes from the comedians and like see if I could deliver them to like this new batch of people that would show up every 2 hours on a Tuesday. You get kind of comfortable being on stage. So not only did I organize events, I would also be like a frequent speaker at all these PyDatas. It was pretty easy for me to always get accepted. Also, pro tip, if you want to be good at getting accepted at conferences, be in a review committee for a bit, because then you know how people are going to judge a talk proposal when it comes in. So I was pretty comfortable on stage, and like I would go to all these different events, and eventually I went to this one event called Spacey in Real Life. I don't know if you've heard about Spacey or like Explosion, but one of the earlier proper NLP packages in Python. And as I was hanging around there, the founders of Spacey just eventually came up to me like, Vincent, we've seen some of your demos during the workshop and all that, and we think you would YouTube well. Okay, that's interesting. I've never done it before, but I also knew nothing about NLP at the moment, but I did want to learn, and the deal was like, okay, Spacey people, you seem to know a lot about NLP, which I want to learn about. I will gladly make you the videos if you can confirm if everything that I'm doing is correct, because then I'll learn about NLP. Like that was the deal, basically. And when you know it, I had this YouTube channel on their side where I would make videos, and those videos ended up doing very well. So then a different AI startup called Raza, they do chatbots. They reached out to me and said like, hey, Vincent, we like your Spacey YouTube videos, and we need someone who can do like developer advocates, but for researchers. Because they had like a pretty big research team, and basically the story was that everyone who was using Raza didn't understand the algorithms. So they needed someone who both could kind of work on the algorithm, but also could explain it. So I did that for a while. Then I went back to Explosion, the Spacey people. They also needed developer advocates, so I worked there. From there, I worked at this group called Probable. They were like the scikit-learn team. They also wanted to have some DevRel person around. And while there, I did a podcast, and I had the founder of Marimo on the podcast, Akshay, who's now my boss. And turns out that he and I went to the same junior high school. Like, that's like before you do a podcast, you have a little bit of banter. And then we found out we had like the same math teacher when, we were 10 to 12 or something like that. So we hit it off, and then eventually they got funding, and I figured, yeah, this notebook is amazing. Like, it's correcting me in all sorts of ways I didn't anticipate. And like, a bit of a long story, but that's how I got where I'm at. So yes, I was a consultant way before, but as you do side activities, you do all the side quests, eventually you learn that the main quest can also update if you just do enough side quests.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting to hear people's stories, because it's not a common job just making YouTube videos about tech. It's not something that you go to study for. You don't go to university to learn how to do that. So it's interesting just hearing people's like stories on how they got into it, how they got comfortable on camera, how they like learned to script, or I'm not sure a process if you script, but how they like got all the gear.
I never
stuff.
script.
You never script? Okay,
I never script.
How that works.
Well, I mean, so like, yes, I make some YouTube videos, but it's not all I do. And like one thing, so I did this Calm Code thing a while ago, and also I made lots of videos for that, but none of those videos had my face in it. And that was because they made the editing so much easier. Like if I misspoke, like I didn't have to align the way my face looked. I could just take the audio, video, click, and then sort of be super done with it. So the main thing that I care about whenever I make a video about Marimo is that I just have a good story or a good explainer or something that deserves to be explained. And I do sort of sit down and sort of think like, okay, what should the intro roughly be, and what should like, the experience be like? But most of the time, at least if I think about like what were good moments that I learned, it was a moment when I was in the bar and the buddy of mine would just, what you put your beer on, what's it, a coaster, I think it's called in English, right? They would flip the coaster, like barely any space, but maybe just enough to do like a little drawing to just get the concept across. And usually that's enough. And that's actually what people want. Like you're not going to become a pro at like Marimo if you're watching a 5-minute video, but maybe I can explain this one concept very well and make you understand like, okay, if this is going to be relevant, if X, Y, Z, and like, here's 5 minutes, I'm not wasting your time. Here's a good explainer of it. And okay, if I want to get that across, then also I should just not overthink it. I should just have a notebook that's like good and ready. And the only thing I should do then is just hit record and explain the thing, and then just edit it so there's no oops and ahs in it, and then I'm done. That's I think
so that's your
a
script,
very good way
basically.
to think about it. I mean, and to some extent, that's fair. Like you could say, like, okay, Vincent, you prepared the notebook and you're reading what's on display there. But I don't want to like. I also think it's super artificial if you stare into a camera and just read what's on the teleprompter. Like there are these moments when we're doing like an official announcement where it matters also to the larger company that I use the right words, and I might use the teleprompter for that. But I think there's something really unpersonal about like just reading something that's on display that you and also. I get that there's a couple of these videos for which it works really well, like the 3 blue 1 brown guy. I'm sure he makes these amazing math explainer videos with like the animations, and I'm sure he does scripting, and like that's a type of content that works very well for him. He should keep doing that. That's great. But I'm really keen to just have like 2 videos a week with a good explainer, and by not overthinking it, I think I can actually manage 2 videos a week on my own that actually and like the views are pretty good. So I have no reason to overdo it, if that makes sense. And and like what some people also tell me is that they actually appreciate the whimsy of it. Like I'm not trying to get as many views as possible. I'm just trying to explain this one thing. And if that's not relevant to you and you leave in the first 10 seconds, I'm actually totally cool with that. Because I just want this thing to be super cool for people who are keen to listen, really. But also we don't really have like we're almost at like 2 million views now, so we do have this like fun little milestone happening pretty soon. And like I will gladly look at that and brag about it. Like sure, number go up, great. But I also don't care. Like eventually the only thing I care about is that the YouTube channel contributes to more people giving Marimo a spin, and that they are aware of the stuff that we do, and people using Marimo is the goal, not more views on YouTube. Like that's very, very secondary compared to the larger picture.
Sure. So in that case, how do you decide on what video to make? Because like, do you go through Marimo and figure out, oh, this bit is quite difficult, let me make a video in it? Are you scrolling Reddit to see what people are struggling with? Like how do you decide on what videos to make?
It's funny you say. So this morning I posted on Reddit, not ask me anything, but tell me anything. My name is Vincent. I make the Marimo videos. What should I make videos about? People show up with like interesting suggestions. So that's a way. I guess like when I started with Marimo, we had this idea of like, okay, like there's just a couple of these concepts that make Marimo different from Jupyter. And Jupyter's a thing that people already know, and Marimo is just a little bit different. Okay, so we should explain those differences very well, because that's possibly a stumbling block or something where people hit their heads. So okay, let's make sure that for like all these sort of weird little edge cases, we've got like at least one video such that if someone does a search, they will find that video. Okay, we got that done. Now what? Okay, well, there's these different communities. So there's like the people that like to use Airflow. That's this one scheduler in Python. There's Prefect, a different scheduler. There's these web frameworks like Flask and Django. Okay, maybe those people have different needs, and we could make some sort of a demo that sort of shows like, okay, for that particular crowd, ooh, I bet they will like this trick. Or like, oh, if you have this little script, that'll make Marimo way more useful for you. Django has this interesting ORM, and to actually wire that up nicely in Marimo, you got to do this one script trick, and once you're there, it's like breezy. Okay, that was the second phase. And then eventually with all that homework done, where I'm now at is a little bit more of like, does the thing excite me? If so, well, marketing is the exchange of enthusiasm. So if I'm very enthusiastic about something, I got to make a video because I'm enthusiastic about it. And maybe other people will be too. And some of that is like, oh, we have this really cool LLM trick, and we'll sure make a video about that. But a lot of the stuff that I really like is just, oh, this new widget allows me to sort of go about this problem in a different way. For example, the Lanchester's Law thing. That was a really fun video for me to make. And of course, like there are some things happening in the world that you got to make a video for that are just slightly topical. So like the company that acquired us, they're called CoreWeave. They're like a very big GPU provider. So like OpenAI is a client, just to give an example, like they rent GPUs. And they recently had this new benchmark that showed that they were the fastest provider of Kimi K2.6. Okay. I guess it makes sense to explore that. And oh, that is really fast. Okay, I'll make like one video on like how you could wire that to Marimo because it really is a very, very fast LLM. Okay, that makes sense. Sure, but I'm still like enthusiastic about it. Like that's always, at least for now, that's like the thing I really try to aim for.
I think that's really cool. So you can just
and you can't script enthusiasm. That's just not the way it works. Yeah. You cannot script enthusiasm.
Yeah, of course not. I think it's cool that you get that across in videos. But you did mention a bit earlier that CoreWeave have acquired Marimo, and so has that changed anything for you? Are you going to make a CoreWeave YouTube channel? Like, how has that changed your day-to-day?
Well, they have a CoreWeave channel. So the org chart, I mean, people might know. So there's also this company called Weights and Biases. If you're into machine learning, you may have heard of them. If you haven't, you haven't. But before they bought us, like I think 5 months earlier, CoreWeave bought Weights and Biases. So the org chart is you've got CoreWeave, then Weights and Biases, and then you've got us. And you can also imagine it's kind of like the software leg of the company in a way. It's not the like giant server farm, the totally different leg. And the main thing, I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, but like a feeling that I do get is that the folks over at CoreWeave are really keen to see us grow. Like, we did like a 10x, like 5% a week. They really like that. And they're also aware of the fact that we seem to be doing something well. So if anything, they do tell us, like, if you want to collaborate, please let us know. We will gladly do a collaboration on YouTube if need be. That's totally fine. But thus far, there has simply never been an edict or anything like that from the top to the bottom that we have to like collaborate or anything. Like, if anything, the Slack channel became a whole lot bigger because before we were like 9 people in the Slack channel, and now it's like almost 1,000. So you do kind of like, okay, not that thread, not that channel, not this one. Like, you do a little bit of that, but that's about it. Really, because they see our growth and they really just want us to continue. So one thing we have done now, so Google has this thing called Colab. That's like Jupyter notebooks provided by Google with like GPUs. This Monday we launched CoreWeave Marimo notebooks on MoLab. So we do get like a pretty beefy Blackwell GPU for free now if you spin up a notebook there. It's a great experiment because the moment you release a product like that, the whole week afterwards, the only thing you're doing is like fraud and abuse prevention, because like a lot of people like to use those GPUs. So like our Slack channel has been a lot of fun this week, but that's like the first thing really that we're doing right now that we would not have done without the acquisition, because we just have access to resources now we didn't have before.
This might be
sorry.
This might be a tangent what I was going to ask, but recently obviously there's been a lot of supply chain attacks, and I've seen it's hit the Python world quite a lot as well with PyPI. Do you have any advice on not getting attacked like that? Because I've used PyPI, and honestly, I know a lot more about NPM and obviously minimum release age and things like that. How do you set that up in Python, or is that not something that...
There's similar things, yeah. So there's also like and for a lot of things, like in JavaScript land, you would do npm something, and in Python nowadays, you would do uv something. It's like pip was like the thing people used to use, but then there was this one group of people that was really good at Rust that made like a thing that was a lot quicker for Python, so that's called uv. It's similar things. The best advice, really, is to just keep that surface small. Like, only depend on projects that you really know well and trust, especially in this age where anyone and their uncle can just vibe code a Python package. Just keep the surface area small, keep it to the boring packages. And if possible, boy, it will be nice if people could maybe fund the packages that matter. So there's a couple of these web frameworks, let's say there's 3 people that maintain Starlet, Fast API is built on that, and like a bunch of other, I think Marimo too. We do not want Starlet to fail because that would have like a huge risk. So okay, like thinking about maybe co-funding that would also be like a good thing to consider. But besides that, just saying no a whole lot and keeping the surface area as small as possible is also the best thing you could do, really.
So it's someone who's not. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, it seems like there's an attack every week these days, so it's good advice. Everyone should make sure they're up to date on all of that stuff.
So in the previous conversation we had, you might have mentioned that you're working on something on the side for video, because you introduced us to Elliot, who we've spoken about. What's the relationship there?
Right. Okay. So. So Elliot has a YouTube channel. It's called Dreams of Code, and I thought it was always like a pretty good, like, YouTuber dude, and like. But then I noticed something that actually gained my respect a whole lot more. He didn't show up for a good month and a half. I was kind of wondering why. Like, YouTube, like usually it's like a video a week, and like most YouTubers do that. But he was like gone for like 6 weeks, and then he came back and he said like, yeah, I'm actually writing proper Rust, and I'm trying to make like a good video editor with a little bit of LLM juice to sort of figure out like what snippets we can sort of cut out. I gave it a spin. And, I looked at it and I was kind of like, okay, like all the LLM tools for video editing, I absolutely hated so far. And this was the first time where I kind of like, okay, like the app is still not in a state where I would like use it, but I do finally see that there's like a hill that can be climbed and it could actually get to some place that I think is pretty darn good. So that's how I reached out. I was kind of like, oh, I kind of like what you're doing, but here's like a list of bugs. And I was like one of the first people that actually reported a good list of bugs, and that's how we kind of kept in contact. So he's doing more of a thing in the video editing domain, and I'm doing more of a thing in like the thumbnail editing domain. So I want to make it as simple as possible to make like these YouTube thumbnails. And my demands are like pretty simple, but like one thing I like is just maybe a photo of me or someone and having there be like a white outline that can easily appear, and I can just make a nice little thing like that, or just something that makes the background making a whole lot simpler. So I definitely vibe coded my own thing. And part of my mind was thinking like, it might be cool to like, could I sell that maybe? Like that's a thought I have in my mind. Part of me doesn't know if it's such a great idea. So there are people sort of reaching out to me and saying like, oh, what you've made sounds pretty useful. But I got to be fully honest, and that is that I don't know Swift that well. Like I know it a little bit now because I made this app and I care about it, and like I do want to maintain it to some extent. So you try to figure out like what's a good file structure, and you do some of those things. But if something was fundamentally broken, I don't like the thought that I am completely dependent on this tool in order to make any change whatsoever, right? So the point where I'm at is, for me, it's cool, and some people that I don't mind sharing it with, I could sort of share it with. But I'm just nowhere near deciding, is this a good idea to sell or not? Like that's kind of a phase where I'm at. So, and I think a lot of people have this sort of interesting thing where it's pretty easy to just vibe code a tool for yourself. But to actually make it a thing that you're willing to sell, it's like such a different quality bar as well, right? And I've not figured that one out personally. It's really weird because it's a tool I use every day. Like every time I make a YouTube video, I just always default to this thing because it's so much better than anything I've tried. But I don't know, like I think for Elliot, and I'm paraphrasing here, like he would be able to tell this yourself better than I would. But I think with Elliot, he really does write the code himself, I think. And that also makes it much more, I care about this thing and I own the thing, and he wants to do more Rust. So, a lot of things come together with that one. It's just, I have a kid as well, and like a family and a life. I don't have the time right now to really learn Swift to the extent that I would need to really maintain that app. But it is a thing that I am building and I'm sort of experimenting with. That is true. But I mean, everyone has this feeling, I think, right now. Like it's super easy to vibe code a thing for yourself. It's just that recognizing there's a difference between good to great for like an actual piece of software like that. That does weigh on you if you want to be responsible about it.
I have loads of like vibe coded apps for random pieces of workflow that I mean, you maybe could release them as a product, but it is like at that point, I've got to make sure it works for everyone and not just on my computer. And also, as you said about ownership, like all of them were pretty vibe coded. So honestly, if they got deleted tomorrow, I would just vibe code them again and like wouldn't care that much about the underlying code as long as I got the output. So to actually release that as a product would need a lot of work and looking into it and making sure it's actually built well.
Well, and I also think the word you use there, care, I think that's key, right? And there's this one thing I noticed that's actually kind of a cool story. So I made this little demo in Lua, like what's the simplest video game you could make, like a little platformy thingy. And it's this thing that Brett Victor also said 10 years ago. At some point, I kind of noticed like, getting the guy to jump on a platform and then he has to jump on the other platform. Like it didn't make the jump. So you want to move the platforms closer, maybe change the gravity thing. And there's a couple of things you could tweak. I do not want to have that conversation with Claude because it'll just be super painful, right? Like I just don't want to have that conversation. So the way I solved this was I made a new IDE. It's called Scrub. I announced it Wednesday on a meetup. And the whole point of the IDE is that every integer and float becomes scrubbable. So you can click the number and you can scrub it to the left or the right. And that changes the integer, but it also immediately saves the file on disk. And there's this really cool thing in Lua and Love2D that you could do where every image tick, basically, whenever there's a redraw, if there is a new file on disk, it can just reload all the modules. So, I can actually, like, no need for a compiler. I can just live update any variable and see it update live in my video game. And that's a cool demo. But the thing I didn't expect, that because I'm able to like actually look at the code and play with it, I started caring about the code a whole lot more. Because I suddenly wanted all the variables to be in a place where I could just very easily scrub things around if I wanted to play with it. And you could also like update an integer in a for loop, so you can make 10 things appear instead of 2. And suddenly you're playing with the code base way more than you would with anything else that Claude generates. So very quickly, I also noticed like, oh my God, like caring about the code is the name of the game here. Like if you find a way to care about the code, everything else will basically follow. And that's like the main thing I don't like about Claude coding sometimes, is you basically put yourself in an ivory tower and the distance between you and the code is like huge, right? And if there's problems, like I've always been like a lowly serf kind of a peon grunt doing coding for a big company. And I always complained to these upper management types in their suits in their ivory tower. And with Claude, you are that guy. And part of me, like, and what I really like about these experiments where like, can we like make you care about the code a bit more? That's always a good thing. And again, we come back to the notebook. This is also what I like about the notebook. You do care about the code a little bit more because it actually shows you the chart that you need. And it also, if you bring in widgets with sliders and everything, also allows you to play a little bit with some of the numbers and some of the settings because it suddenly becomes interactive. It's not like some static file that you gotta stare at all day. So, but there is, like, again, you use the word care. I do think that's going to be the name of the game very quickly. Like, how can you actually get yourself to care about the software? Because that's going to be the poison if we're not careful.
Yeah, I think it's obviously because code is technically incredibly cheap now. Like you can get Claude to write it so quickly, and it's actually adding value to that code. And like previously, when you wrote a whole app, you'd sat there for hours writing the code yourself, so it had the value of man hours in it. But now it's just, in one prompt you can seemingly get something that works. But you might want to look into that code to actually check that it's good.
I do think there's this one statement where Claude can maybe do the work and some of the thinking, but it will never be able to do the understanding. You still want to do some of that yourself, right? And I do want to assign a lot of value on that one. Because that fear of like, can I sell this if I don't understand the code? I mean, that is really frightening, especially if you're carrying people's secrets and all of that. Another like fun little anecdote here, maybe. So I made this flashcard app for myself because I do want to like train my memory. Like if I'm not, if Claude can do more stuff so I don't have to remember as much anymore, then I still want to have a exercise to make sure my memory doesn't sort of erode. So I made this app called remember.cards. Very hard to forget, which is good. But then, of course, you try to think like, maybe the LLM can make me flashcards. Like that would be like a thing to use LLMs for. So the flashcards that I'm interested in making are, I want to say thank you in every language. So in Romanian, it's mulțumesc. It's a really cool word. So the front of the card is like, how do you say thank you in Romanian? The other rate is like, it reads mulțumesc. And then, I tell Claude to make all the cards, and it did. And do you want to know what the first card was? How do you say thank you in English? Which is like the perfect description of what it's like to learn with Claude. Like it can generate a lot of the stuff for you. It's like pretty impressive. But at the same time, it's so clear it doesn't do any understanding whatsoever. And in the case of the flashcards, one thing I also learned there was Claude should not write any flashcard. I should do that myself manually. Because if I care about learning the thing, maybe the act of writing it down is going to help me remember more than any practice that I might do after, right? And just being in the loop there is going to be way better for my memory than outsourcing all of that to Claude. Like it's also fun to know things, right? So let's not not outsource my mind right away because it's quote unquote easier.
Yeah, similar to like an experience I've had talking to some of my friends who aren't in the development world is obviously they've started to use ChatGPT and Claude at work. And I've heard some of them before say like, oh, it got this bit wrong and all of that. But then the next sentence, they'll be like, oh, I use it for everything. I use it for like to learn this new stuff. And I was like, remember the thing that you knew a lot about where you noticed ChatGPT was wrong. It's like you need to remember for the stuff that you don't know anything about. There's also going to be wrong information in there. It's like, remember it can be wrong. But the second you start learning new things and asking ChatGPT, you can't tell if it's wrong. So yeah, try not to take it as the absolute truth.
Yeah, and again, like it's fun to know things as well. So it's also fine. Like that's the way I kind of deal with it. Like it's cool that Claude can do everything. It's just that I'm selfish. I don't want it to, and I can defend that publicly. But yeah, but also everyone should figure out what they want to do with this themselves. Also, again, like one thing that I do. One thing I have noticed is maybe general advice. Like I'm kind of curious if you folks have also experienced this too. Have you also noticed that, if it's true that the LLMs are going to be able to execute all the code for us, right? Then probably the main thing that us meatbags can bring to the table is that we need to come up with good ideas for the LLMs to do. Are LLMs conducive to this? Because one thing I've noticed is that if I want to come up with a good idea, I need to be as far away from the computer as possible these days. And like hang out with the kid, maybe go to a bar again, like with pen and paper and like try to like get the creative juices going. And then like while not behind the computer, an idea will just strike me and then I just need to not forget about it. And again, like Claude is going to be terrible at that. Right?
Yeah, I think there's a popular interview from a guy who owns Take-Two, and someone said, oh, because AI can make games now, are you worried that people are just going to make loads of good games? And he said, well, it's always been possible to make games. It's always been easier to make games, but the LLM or the AI won't give you creative new ideas, and you kind of have to come up with it yourself. I think that's true. That's my experience as well. I won't come up with new ideas.
So so it's bad at coming up with a good idea, and it's also bad at caring, which is all the polish you need in order to actually get a game that's worth anything on Steam. So it's that weird combination, I think, where like, dear listener, do remember that stuff matters.
It's similar, obviously, the debate around AI filmmaking and things is the problem with all of these AIs is they've only learned on things we've already done. So it pretty much can't come up with something new. Obviously, humans are pretty inspired by other humans as well. So it's sort of a slight parallel. But
yeah, you can't have it make a very unique style.
Yeah.
Like you can only own your own unique style in a way.
On that one, actually, because I'm curious if you have a counter example. I've not been able to find it. Have movies and videos become better now that everything is being streamed? So one thing I can come up with like one series of movies that I deem like really, really good, well worth your time, and I gladly took an evening off for that. It's the Knives Out movies. They're detective movies, and they're good. Like they are genuinely. But I started looking at one, and I was kind of like, why do I feel a sense of genuine relief? Because there should be good movies every week. Like Planet Earth, Hollywood. Like why is there like only one good movie every 2 years, maybe? And then I started thinking like, okay, the same maybe holds for like there's a couple of projects that are out there now that feel like a genuine next step in the evolution of the enlightenment of computer code. But like we've got LLMs now, and there's not like a tenfold increase of amazing software that we can build upon. Like, oh, hang on, something weird is happening here. Like that's also a thought I'm sort of trying to deal with. Like, okay, like there's all this evidence that things have become easier. Why is not everything better?
So you're talking about streaming services, like so Netflix, Disney Plus, all those things. Are you saying since you can stream things now, it should be easier to make good things? Is that what you're saying?
It definitely. So I have to be maybe careful with my words. You're right on that one. So I'm using Netflix kind of as a metaphor of like, hey, I've started noticing that there simply isn't as much quality as I would expect, because you would imagine there's so many people watching Netflix. There's, again, so much demand that there should also be supply on the other side of it. But it kind of feels like the supply that we get is quantity, not quality. And there's a similar thing happening with LLMs, it feels like, yeah, there's more code being written, but it's not like there's more code that I care about. Like, I still care about code that existed before, like really good web frameworks and things I like using and things I like maintaining. But Has Airbnb become a better web app now? Has Booking.com become a better web app now? Like, are there examples of code that we have now that we simply could not have had before that really move the needle? And I like to say, yeah, I work at Marimo.
You struck a chord. You struck a chord of a thing that I'm really terrified of. I think I've noticed that a lot of these apps that were stable 2 years ago are not stable anymore. There's a lot of more bugs coming up, and I think that's because everyone's like vibe coding features on top of it and not double checking anything. And I feel like we're gonna get to a point where even the most stable apps are not gonna be stable anymore.
I mean, you're probably referring to GitHub, I think, when you're saying that. I could be wrong.
one of them, yeah.
I mean, like GitHub is the most like visible example, but like I mean, consumer apps like the same you mentioned, Booking.com. Like I think we're 2 weeks away from maybe a critical bug that they might introduce. I don't know.
I mean, there's another fear you could have. Like, okay, if this is the way people are sort of getting used to programming, right? What if right now there's a whole lot of knowledge eroding, and the knowledge that we need to fix this is being eroded along with it? Like, can we get people out of retirement in time? Like, when we need to, like, and again, it's such a weird thing, but I don't know. Like, there's been just a couple of moments for me, and this is very personal. At Marimo, we definitely use LLMs now and again, but it does feel like almost everyone individually has landed at this place where I don't trust the LLM fully, and I also don't want my skills to fully atrophy. I'm speaking on behalf of colleagues, and I'm not entirely sure if this is 100% accurate, but it does feel like a lot of us really do care about what's going in. So if something is vibe coded, we do want this other colleague to actually check by hand, like, because we do care about, Marimo being like super stable software and all of that. I don't know to what extent this holds for other projects out there.
Similar to something you said there is, I always have the same question as well, is like a lot of people say, oh, AI like does the role of this junior person at this company. And it's like, but then who's going to be the senior person in 20 years? It's like, if we've replaced all of the juniors, who goes through the pipeline of actually learning everything like normal juniors went through?
Well, I think, so sure, but I mean, if I think back about the biggest value items that I brought to the table when I was a junior, none of that was related to the code per se. It was more about like, hey, dude, you shouldn't do this problem this way. So like a example that I have that, you can watch some YouTube videos of talks of mine that I did. When I made my first recommender system, it was like the Dutch BBC basically. And the Dutch BBC said, like, we don't care about having more views. We care more about like our entire catalog being viewed. So we want to actually have diversity in our recommendations that people would still click. What we care about the diversity and people watching. We don't want to do clickbait. You actually have to watch the video after. And there were all these PhDs saying deep learning, TensorFlow, future, do it. And like I was there and I kind of made fun of them by saying like, should we maybe build like an A/B testing system first before we do any of that stuff? Because if we can't A/B test the recommender system, right? Like, okay, then kind of dumb. And then I'm paraphrasing the story a little bit here, but the PhD said, okay, fine, we'll check back in 2 weeks. And again, they came back in and they kind of said like, okay, you've made the recommender system? Yes. Can we now do the TensorFlow thing? Like, we got to flow our tensors. And again, I said, nah, but what we can also do is take the current recommender system that's already there and just, there were like 3 slots in the recommenders, like first item, second item, third item. We can also just shuffle that around to see if there's like any clicking bias happening. And that would be good to know before we do any A/B testing. And again, they came back and then they said, okay, how about now? Like, yeah, we haven't A/B tested our A/B testing system. Like, we want to make sure that our A/B testing system isn't biased, so let's do that test. And this went on for like a couple of weeks. And then the PhDs came back like, finally now can we do the thing? And I kind of said, well, sure, but I want to test this thing where we just recommend the next episode of the thing they're watching. And these PhDs have been doing like math and stuff and like all the TensorFlows, but it just completely eluded them that you could also just recommend the next episode of the show that the person's currently watching. Again, I don't want to suggest that this is the job of the junior, but sometimes it helps to have someone that's junior that sort of points to the senior and kind of goes like, isn't there like a much simpler thing? Because I don't know about this deep learning thing, but maybe that's like a better thing to do. So there's also a lot of personality that a junior can bring along just because they're the eager space cadet, if it were, that like an older guy like me who has a wife and kid just won't do, right? So that's more the thing I'm afraid of. I actually think that a lot of good ideas come from the fact that there's a junior around who's like not used to the way the company is supposed to run and therefore is able to step outside the box a bit. Like, that's more the thing I'm afraid of than like, do we still have engineers in the future? Like, it definitely, it feels more that sometimes the wheel needs to be reinvented and people are not discovering that. Like, that's the thing I'm personally more Because that's also like for open source ecosystems, right? Like you kind of need some of that young blood to also come up with new ideas. So to me, it's not so much about like, oh, do we still have seniors around? It's more like, okay, what's the source of new ideas going to be? Surely it's not going to be the 50-year-old that has an LLM. Like it's got to be someone who is able to ask critical questions and wonders if there's maybe a better way. Typically, those are the 20 to 30-year-olds, not the 40 to 50-year-olds.
Yeah, I think you have to get to a point where everyone cares a bit less about AI. Right now, there's so much hype, and like the next skill, the next kind of plugin is taking precedent. But when things calm down, people can bring some really interesting ideas to the world.
I mean, there's so much cool things to make. That's also it should still be exciting, but I'm worried about the fact that I haven't seen as much cool stuff yet. Like that's still a worry. But I will say like one thing. I'm tooting my own horn here. To me, Marimo is like a really cool exception though, because we do these notebook competitions once in a while. The stuff that comes out of that is just super fun. People get really down and creative with that. So that's even if they use LLMs, you can just tell that the idea they have in their mind. That's like the cool thing, and the LLM just builds it for them. But there's still like a good attempt at creativity there, which is always cool to see.
Did you want to say something, James?
I was going to say, I've seen a lot recently on Twitter of companies starting to realize how much tokens are costing with their individual developers and how much return they're getting back. Because I think there was a few companies that were like, oh, developers use unlimited amounts that you can. And the problem is they'll try do things like 20 different ways with 20 Claude instances. And then you add one feature in the end. And it's cost quite a lot of money. If you just sort of sat down and actually planned it out first, it would have been a lot cheaper for them. So I've seen a fair few companies say they might start cracking down a bit on that.
I mean, yeah, there's a bit. I've also heard the story that I don't know. Claude has now said like, okay, but if you're an individual, you can still do the like $100 a month thing. But if you're a company, then we do the per token thing because enterprise, whatever that means. I'm partially relieved by that because it then forces people to use their mind a little bit more. Like you probably want to solve it on pen and paper before you put it into the machine, kind of a thing. Maybe whiteboard with a colleague. Another thing I read, Pragmatic Engineer, Gergely, he good takes, an excellent podcast, by the way. Also highly recommend that. He had this interesting tweet where he said, like, you know how back in the day, if you wanted to do something and you didn't really know if it was a good idea, you would just tap the shoulder of your colleague and you would discuss about whether or not something was a good idea. And as a result, you probably both learned something. Oh, but you're talking to the LLM now, and you're probably not tapping your colleague on the shoulder. But that means that like a lot of good lessons are just not happening, right? It's that part too, right? Like because the LLM is going to be like really sycophantic about the whole thing. It's just going to tell you that your ideas are amazing. It's going to change its will the moment you toot your horn. But that sort of critical conversation between two professionals, like, well, there's a lot of stuff that happened there too. But yeah, we'll see. And the weirdest thing I've heard so far is that there's people who buy these fancy keyboards and that are now saying like, maybe I don't need an ergonomic keyboard anymore because I don't do typing anymore. Right?
So what's your personal setup? Are you like Claude Code? Are you what's the word? Codex? Are you Cursor? One of the C's?
I'm of the I want to try out different things a whole lot. So I do like you. So I don't think there's ever a state of the art. It doesn't really exist, but I do like to think in sort of sensible defaults. There is this tool called Conductor that I really like. It can plug into both Codex and it can plug into Claude. I do want to sort of preface this, like I do have a semi-working relationship with these people, so feel free to ignore everything I'm about to say about them as well. But to me, that's a very sensible default. And the main thing that I like about it is I can very easily just have a brain fart, kind of go like, oh, is this possible? Start up a workspace, try it out, and then I can move back to doing other things. I like open code just because it lets me try out all sorts of open source models as well. So that's a thing I also really like to use. And I'm also using Pi a whole lot, but it's more because I can do these tricks like, okay, so we can spin up a sandbox on Molab with a GPU, and then that's like a Python sandbox with a GPU, basically. And I can have my local LLM use that little sketchpads trick to connect to it. But I do want the LLM not to touch any files locally then, please. Like the whole point of a sandbox is that it can only write there and it can only do stuff there. I don't want to do anything locally. And the really cool thing about Pi is that every time that a tool call event happens, you can catch it. You can say like, okay, is this an edit command? Okay, block. You can only edit in the file that's in the cloud. Oh, is this a read command? Okay, you're allowed to do that, but only on these two files because those are the two skill files. Like that flexibility is amazing. So I am finding myself exploring that a whole bunch more. And again, like all the other stuff that I really do is I do a lot of just this. Like I'm taking math courses again and taking like really hard math puzzles. Not that hard, but like they're hard now because I haven't done math in 10 years. So like a lot of my like a lot of my currency that I bring to the table for the Marimo people is like really cool demos, which means that my currency is also a little bit more in the can I come up with cool stories and that sort of a thing. So a lot of the stuff that I really try to do is just also try not to be behind the computer too much and actually be an interesting person with an interesting life to the outside of it. So like one thing I've started doing is I've taken my first lesson with a vocal coach. Which, you know, it's kind of this out there thing to do, but if you're doing YouTube, it's actually not that crazy. And then you learn about how the voice works, and it's all sorts of fascinating things. And that's making me wonder, like, oh, is there like a medical data set about this? Because that might be fun to demo as well. And that only happens because I'm also doing things out there, like touching grass in real life. So my main concern is just, can I still remain nice and creative? Because that's where a lot of fun and like good things from Marimo also happen. And to do that, I also need to dive into the Marimo code base now and again, but I also need to be able to escape. So that's more the frequency where I'm at.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to be. Not kind of too stuck in the computer, but also in touch with the real world. Because I guess you kind of get stuck in, which I do a lot. I kind of get stuck in the tech bubble, and I think, oh, why isn't this neighbor like trying out ChatGPT or Claude? Like, it's going to make their life so much easier, but they're just like have no idea. And this is interesting to see the average person what they know about AI compared to like us. I guess.
I'm kind of curious about you. Okay, we're going to reverse the rules now. I'm going to ask you just you folks a quick question. So I can definitely imagine, like for you, you're also maintaining a YouTube channel for a company, and I can imagine for you, like the views might be like definitely a bit of a growth goal. Like you don't want the views to plummet. But I can then also imagine there's a bit of pressure to sort of be on top of the thing that's hot this week, right? But I can also imagine that it's not always the thing that you're most excited about. Is that like a thing that's happening in your mind as you're, I don't know if you have meetings about what content to make. I don't know if it's like a round robin thing that y'all do, but because you've got like multiple people on the YouTube side, I think.
Yeah. I don't know who wants to speak first, but I think everything you said is true. There are sometimes things that are really popular. They're like, I don't know if I really care about it. I think I don't know if James has found it, but with the model releases, like I used to do videos and then when I stopped because I don't really care about incremental.
Yeah,
updates.
It's a bit all samey at some point, I guess.
And so yeah, I think if there's something that I'm not interested in after a while, I'd probably stop doing it. And I guess there was a point where I would do it because I know it's popular, but I guess I'm starting to not do that as much.
Yeah, okay. And it's also because you I can also, but part of it is probably also if you're more enthusiastic on the camera, that tends to like matter as well, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say I find it really hard to be enthusiastic for something I'm not. It's similar like the other day she said about model releases. I didn't make one when 4.8 came out. But then I did make one when the last Gemini came out because there was something more than just the benchmarks are better. I think that's a very boring point that we're at with the new model releases now is like, oh, it does 5% better. And like, it's also really hard to show now because AI is very good at coding. Like before you used to be like, oh, look at this website it made, but they're all incredibly good at that now. Like before it started out doing one button or like one card on a website and you were like, wow, this actually looks okay. And now it can do the whole website fully vibe coded pretty well. So it's quite hard to show complex changes in a video when the model just came out. Like I sort of do often prefer the way of wait 2 or 3 weeks and actually get some real usage in a real code base and see it in there and how it actually plays out. But yeah, I sort of see the way we cover topics is a lot. Like we do cover news and I sort of like that. We stay on top of the trends and try and see what is actually good or what might be a bit too sales pitchy. And then yeah, sometimes there is like a personal project or something that you'll make a video on. So one that I have coming out soon is like I switched over to the Z editor, which I mean it's sort of new, but it's not. Didn't come out this week.
I've also sort of switched as well. Z, and you can definitely make a few videos on Z. Z is cool.
But yeah, that's sort of how I see how we come up with content.
Interesting. One thing I have noticed, at least, but it's also like a personal thing. I've seen the hype for pandas and then TensorFlow and then Spark. Like I've been through all these hype cycles, and typically it's like the syntax is never the interesting thing. The thing that is interesting is if there's a tool that makes you think differently about a problem, but then it's more the thinking that matters than the tool itself. So, okay, like if this tool, like one thing that we have now is we've got GPUs now, right? On this cloud platform thingy that I talked about. Does that mean I can think differently about the code that I write? And one exercise I did do was like, okay, let's take an algorithm to solve the traveling salesman problem. It's like finding the tour in all the cities. Like it's a computationally super complex thing. There's like academic papers about it. Oh, but if there's a GPU, one funny thing you could do actually is like if all the pairs of cities fit in memory, then you can fit all the pairs in memory, and you can just ask the GPU like, which one of these pairs should I flip? And I can just do all of them in one swoop. Oh, hang on. That's like very different than how I would write an algorithm for a CPU. Oh, but I can actually maybe benchmark this approach to like a normal CPU approach. And then, actually, the way that I'm going about this problem is not syntax at all. It's more the concept of how the GPU works. And, that I can actually get super enthusiastic about. But the syntax itself is like super boring. But like if it does feel like that is where a story might be. And also, when I look at a lot of YouTube, I wish more people would go about it that way, because the announcement of the number is way less interesting than like the way. If you can rethink about a problem because of this tool, then you can sort of come up with a cool story. But yeah, like you always got this one guy that sort of has this like YouTube thing where his face is like super amazed all the time whenever there's a new model out, and then you watch the video and it's just like, oh, number went up. Like just such a boring video to watch. But yeah, okay, interesting.
I think it's a great kind of idea to frame a video around a good story instead of around just like a topic. I think it's quite an interesting thing. I don't necessarily know if it will hit like the views and stuff, but it'll be a fun one to make because you've come up with a story around the topic that is an interesting story for the thing you're talking about.
It's sort of like classic YouTube in that I think the video that I've made personally that I like the most is probably one of my least viewed videos.
Same.
But, I liked it.
The thing I have noticed is that sometimes you're so enthusiastic about a topic that you have to be careful that you don't go through it so fast just because of your own enthusiasm. You still got to like, okay, but maybe a person who's not as into this as I am needs to understand why it's so interesting. Maybe like that's a step that's perhaps easy to forget about. In general, though, a game I always like to play in my mind. At some point, you're going to hit this point where Gemini can just make a summary of every YouTube video. You can kind of already ask it to do that. So there's a couple of these YouTube channels where half the time the videos are useful, the other half they're not. Can I just get the summary before I actually decide to see the video? And then you can just always tell like, but there's a few of these creators and there's a few of these videos that, I just want to see them. Even if I see the summary, I still want to see it. I don't know exactly what it is, but that's the feeling that I do try to chase. Like I do try to, even if you read a summary of the video, you would probably still want to watch it.
Yeah, I can't
actually,
go on.
I do want to say that a thing that I've noticed about our channel is like if we do anything that is centered around video models, people will not be interested in those videos. So I'm curious for like Marimo channel, have you noticed that there are certain topics that people just aren't interested in, like different data sets that people are not interested in, or I don't know, topics that don't resonate as well?
So in general, I have noticed that if you were to go for YouTube Shorts, for example, all the widget stuff that we have that's very visual does pretty well because you're watching a thing, and then that makes it very nice for a short. So if you have like a really pretty graph, like things work well there. Besides that, I mean, we do make. I have this one video that's all about the keyboard shortcuts of Marimo. So just watch this video, and we're going to go through all the keyboard shortcuts, and then you'll be better at doing the keyboard shortcuts. And we do all sorts of mnemonic exercises to make sure it's in your mind. Well, obviously, only the really like people that already know Marimo are going to like that video. If you've never heard about Marimo, why on earth would you watch a video about like keyboard shortcuts in Marimo? That's not going to work. So one way to think about that maybe is that we do have this sort of hardcore audience that really loves Marimo for what it already is, and like a core group. But there's more people that haven't used Marimo than people that have. So some of the videos are there just to maybe nerd snipe as a word, or lure them in, or like show them that it's maybe perhaps relevant, maybe give them a spin. And then there's just different crowds of like, there's the web development people. They might like the video if we make it really bespoke to them. And then there are the AI people, which are very generic these days. But then if we can show something interesting about, in the case of Kimi K 2.6, the thing that I did find interesting about that one is it's quote unquote a worse model when you look at the code quality. But because it's so fast, it might actually be okay, because it's really good at like generating the next cell. And I don't trust the code as much, so I'm going to be way more critical as I look at it. That's actually a mode of programming that maybe people should try more. Okay, so then people who are interested in AI still get to hear about what it's like to use it with Marimo, which is different than normal IDEs, and that's actually good. That's also a way to approach it. But again, well, as with a lot of these things, if I'm at least a little bit excited, then I just make the video. And I'm at the point right now where every short that we make gets like 3,000 views, and every normal video we make gets at least 2,000. Sure, that's not like a million, but 2,000 views is still 1,000 people. That's amazing. Like, it's not every day that you like communicate something to 1,000 people. And sure, some videos get 10K, which is cool, but 2K for every video is still like pretty darn good.
Yeah, well, there's also sort of the thing of the quality of your audience can matter quite a lot, because obviously there was the podcast, was it TBPN or whatever it's called, that OpenAI bought, and they actually don't get relatively that many views compared to other podcasts like the top of Spotify. But the reason OpenAI valued it a lot was because the people that do listen to it are like VC investors and stuff, and they wanted to reach them. And I think it's similar for sort of coding things. Is like we always had a rule when we started that like we don't want to explain things to junior developers necessarily, because I think people get bored of that. If you are a more senior developer and you come in, someone's saying like, well, this is how you install this package. It's like everyone knows how to install an NPM package. We don't need to spend 30 seconds or 1 minute going through this.
That's more boilerplate than junior person per se.
Yeah, I suppose.
Right?
Yeah, but it just sort of in general, like rules around that is like you don't need to explain everything in the video so that everything is understandable. I think targeting, we sort of have a picture of maybe someone similar to us that has that level of understanding than necessarily explaining every single concept in the video. Still explain obviously the core concept that you're showing off, but I think there's a lot of tangent subjects that you can get lost in, and the video will be like 20 minutes long, and we sort of strive for shorter.
There is this attention span thing you do got to mind a little bit. So like it's 7 to 10 minutes does it, and then once you go to 20, you're going to see that less and less people are going to watch the whole thing. That's definitely true.
There's also a drop off when code is shown on screen. I do notice the second code gets shown, there is a drop off, but it's like I don't know how to work around that.
Well, so in my case, I could show very little code, but still show the interactive widget thing. So one thing that I do somewhat frequently is I talk about this one academic paper, and then to explain a paper, well, maybe a moving chart does a better job than like all the code, and then I can very briefly show like the one important bit in the code that makes everything work and explain the why, but then have the rest be super visual and interactive and that sort of a thing. Like that tends to work pretty well for the Marimo side of things. It's a well-known thing across like other tech channels, like other tech YouTubers have also complained about it. I do think it's good to show some of the code, just because I think a meal needs vegetables, if that makes sense. Like I don't think you can be a tech channel and all you do is reaction videos, but are you still a tech channel at that point, or are you just the morning TV show that people watch before they have coffee? Like I don't know. But it's again, like it comes back to the enthusiasm. I still want to be somewhat happy with the videos that I make, and in order to do that, I sometimes I just feel like we have to show code here, so we just do.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I know we've wrapped up over an hour now. I don't know how you're doing for time, but we can.
I'm still happy to like hang around, but we should wrap up at some point. One thing I think I am kind of curious about, and a little bit more about the AI thing, because it does feel like that's something that a lot of people have questions about. If you were to take a critical look right now, probably you also all experience some sort of a skill atrophy kind of a moment, right? And because we mentioned caring, do you feel like is it a skill atrophy thing, or maybe a caring about the code thing? And is that something that you would like to see change or not? Just out of curiosity. I feel like I'm asking this question to more and more people, but I've never really asked it to JavaScript people before, so I'm trying now.
It's an interesting one. I kind of think it might be a bit of both, honestly. I know that's quite a boring answer, but I've sort of been going through something recently where I do feel like my skills have atrophied, and like I want to get back to just saying like don't use AI for a bit and try and study some more of the concepts, and maybe give myself a refresher course on things that I even know, like, or did know once, just to make sure that I still know them. And then, as we said, with like AI is so good at JavaScript and TypeScript, so I don't really care about a lot of the code that's generated for like my side project apps. So I think it's a bit of both. As I said earlier, sometimes like I don't even commit it to GitHub. I'll just, if it gets lost on my file system, I know I can really quickly vibe code it again. So there's definitely a piece of sort of caring about the code, and also skills.
Well,
as well.
What I do hear is that you want to care more. There's something that makes you do kind of go, I used to care more about this, and I missed that.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. Is like I go into coding for the fun of going through problems and realizing that I could solve them with code and going through that entire process of like debugging a problem and doing it. And sort of AI has taken a bit of that fun away in the way that it can do quite a lot of it. But then the flip of the coin is I also think, well, if AI can do a lot of this, maybe I can learn more advanced topics that I wouldn't have been able to get to as quick before. And I think that's the step that I need to take, is like learning something new. Like Rust, for example, I really want to actually dive in and learn that the proper way.
It's kind of interesting because, like, if you think about all the developer interviews for jobs, like you're going to be presented with a lead code question, and then they're going to ask you, okay, do a first pass just so it works, and now optimize it so, you know, the cyclomatic complexity would be less. Yeah. And like, you put so much effort in learning that for the interview, but then you get to the job and it's like, okay, here's the website, let's just build the website. And the thing that I'm just sometimes, and I'm thinking about, like, aren't people caring about how optimized the code is that Claude has written? Like, surely there are ways that you can dig into the code and, oh, I could optimize this better. And I know that Amazon cares about how fast the page loads, because that will make or break your customer base, like how many customers you can attract. I haven't worked for Amazon, but like, surely there are a lot of companies that are just, the website works, let's just move on. But I feel like I would want to care more about the optimization of the code to, you know, make it the best you can for what you've written. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, there's a YouTuber, well, he's not a YouTuber, but he's a guy on people's podcasts called Casey Muratori, I think.
Oh, that's the guy I was mentioning earlier. He's amazing. He's good.
Yeah. He doesn't use AI, but because he loves the craft of coding, he just like actually enjoys coding. And I think for me, like James said, I want to also learn a systems language. Maybe so I want to kind of learn it from scratch, understand how it works and how to manage memory, all that stuff. But like for things I don't really care about, I don't mind just getting AI to vibe code it, just like build the thing that's in my head, make it exist, and just get it out in the world. And I think for companies, or just like depending on where you work, if you don't care, or if I don't care about the products, or if like someone's just working a code job but they don't really care about code, then like I think AI is like the best thing ever, because they can just like slap something out, get their features done and moved on, like move on to the thing they really care about, which is, I don't know, it could be making cakes or going running or whatever. And so it really depends on the person and like what they want to do. And like if you do enjoy code and writing code, AI is probably not the best thing to use. But if you don't, then I think AI can just get your work done really quickly.
Yeah, this is, I mean, okay, interesting. So in Python land, I hear very similar things. It's just that there's this one thing that the LLMs are really bad at, and that is analyzing a data set. But that's because if you consider a data set analyzed, a human has to do some understanding. That's just a part of it that's not going to go away. And that's the bit where and also there's like judgment there. We don't want to make the bad decision. So like someone needs to be involved. My impression is that in what you're describing is much more of a JavaScript experience with LLMs than in Python, but only with regards to stuff you do in notebooks. If you're a Python web developer and you spend a lot of time in PyCharm, then I suddenly hear the same story.
When you say analyzing, is that like going inside the data set and cleaning the data, like removing false positives and stuff like that?
I mean, that's one aspect of it. Like, you still want to. So if the LLM says, I've done all the sentiment analysis, these are all positive, these are all negative, and now make a marketing decision based off of it, part of me would like to think, like, okay, can we measure how often I agree with the LLM? Because I don't want to automate a bad decision there. So that's one aspect of it. There is also this other thing that you could do, and this is the final story because we do have to probably wrap up. But have you ever heard of the Gorilla Dataset? Have you heard of the Gorilla video?
Yeah, the one where the gorilla walks in the video and nobody notices.
Yeah, so the thing is, like, in the beginning of the video, they say there's a ball being thrown around. Pay attention to the ball. You pay attention to the ball, and then the video stops. And then they sort of say, like, did you see the gorilla walking through? And you kind of go, no, I was following a ball. Was there a gorilla? What? And then you watch the video again, and it turns out there's a guy in a gorilla suit just randomly walking around, and these people that are throwing balls at each other. And the thing that's important there is if you focus your attention on one thing, there's a lot of stuff around the one thing that you can sometimes not notice. And there's a data set with this idea in mind where They did this research in Italy. Half the group got the data set and got asked, like, do your hypothesis tests. So you got the body mass index, number of steps a day, male or female, and they would do their hypothesis test to check, like, is there a correlation between all these different variables? And the other group got said, like, do whatever. Just, here's a data set, find me the thing that's important here. And if you were to make a plot of the steps per day, body mass index, and then gender, you would see a picture of a gorilla that's waving back at you. Now, the question is, which of these two groups was more likely to notice? And it's the group that didn't get the hypotheses to check for, because they were more like, oh, I know what's in here. Let's make a plot. And a lot of people that only did the hypothesis stuff, they just went ahead, knee-jerk reaction, calculate the thing, done. Okay, suppose you give this data set to an LLM. What's going to happen? Are they going to find the gorilla in the data set? So far, every time I tried, it did not find the gorilla in the data set. It would just report on the correlations. You could actually make a screenshot of the chart, and you could ask it, like, hey, is there a gorilla in this data set? And then it would sort of say, you mean metaphorically, because there's a correlation between X, Y, and Z. Like, that's the thing that I've seen happen a bunch. And this is the phenomenon that's making that's kept notebooks very relevant, and also kept analysis jobs very relevant, because someone needs to understand what's in the data within the company, and if you do it wrong, you're going to make very bad decisions. Your recommender is going to be out of whack, or I don't know, you're going to report the wrong VAT numbers to the tax office, or things of that nature. So the LLMs are still really bad at finding the gorilla in a data set.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
And that might be a good place to end on.
I didn't expect the conversation to go the way it did, but yeah, you've got some very good anecdotes and the things you want to plug in.
Any shameless plugs that you want to plug about yourself?
I mean, check out the Calm Code YouTube if you want to see keyboard reviews or random things that I think is interesting. I'm doing math stuff now. Check out Marimo if you haven't already. Also, if you're a JavaScript person, you want to learn Python, Marimo might be the most fun you'll have. And if not that, for God's sakes, go and touch some grass.
Amen.
Try to be worry more about being an interesting person in your life than about the numbers of tokens you'll burn. That might be a thing to do.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Better Start podcast. Find us wherever you listen to your podcasts. So it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere else. And for me, it's goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.